be about democracy, जिस नाम से, जिस क्वालिटी से इंडिया दुनिया भर में जाना जाता है. वॉल्यूम थोड़ी सी आप रखिएगा माइक की. I would request everybody to be seated. Will request everybody to clear the corridors. जो भी आपकी बातचीत हो, आप या तो बैठ के या बाहर जाके आराम से कर सकते हैं. The next session is titled as Launch of Democracy with Dharma, the Successful Indian Experiment. We are delighted to have Salvatore Babones in conversation with Rahul Shivshankar, and as guest of honor, we are delighted to have Shri Aniruddha Bose. I will love to invite the guest on the dais, Mr. Salvatore Babones, in conversation with Rahul Shivshankar ji, and as guest of honor.
And the book will be launched in the presence of Justice
Aniruddha Bose. And his book will be launched in the presence of Shri Aniruddha Bose ji. Justice Aniruddha Bose ji. Guests on the dais, we are delighted to have Mr. Salvatore Babones with us, who is an associate professor at the University of Sydney, whose current research focuses on global democracy indices. He has also published on economic development and statistical methodology. His work on India has educated Western audiences about the high quality of India's democratic institutions. Mr. Salvatore has a deep understanding of rigorous global data analysis and comparative perspective, grounding the session in evidence-based assessments of democracy and institutions of India. As the discussant for the session, we are delighted to have Rahul Shivshankar ji with us. He is a consulting editor with Network 18 and the anchor of CNN News 18's primetime show, The Hard Facts. He began as a print journalist with the Times of India and became one of its youngest leader writers. He later served as the editor-in-chief, leading the channel to multiple Channel of the Year awards and anchoring the top-rated show, India Upfront. Rahul ji has interviewed global leaders, including Narendra Modi ji, Boris Johnson, and Bill Gates. Mr. Rahul brings sharp journalistic insights and on-ground experience, grounding the discussion in hard facts and accountability. We are also joined by the guest of honor, Justice Shri Aniruddha Bose ji, who is a former judge of the Supreme Court of India and former Chief Justice of the Jharkhand High Court. He began his legal practice in Calcutta High Court in 1985. He then went on to become the Chief Justice of the Jharkhand High Court in 2018 and was elevated to the Supreme Court in 2019, where he authored 67 judgments and was part of the landmark benches on issues such as Jallikattu, decriminalization of adultery, and the right to die. He retired in April 2025. Justice Bose ji adds deep constitutional wisdom and judicial perspectives, enriching the discussion with legal clarity on rights, ethics, and landmarks, as well as interpretation of law. I would request the gentlemen to please carry forward the session, and we should join them with a round of applause, everybody.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Bhopal. Lovely to be here in your beautiful city and in these fantastic environs. Let's have a nice conversation about Salvatore Babones' book. I'm a little surprised that there are not many more people wanting to hear his insights on India's democracy. Maybe we take our democracy too lightly. Maybe we take it for granted. That's why there are not many people here who want to listen in to this brilliant author and his brilliant work, Democracy with Dharma, the successful Indian experiment. So without much ado, let me begin by asking you, Salvatore Babones, to tell me a little bit about the title of this book, Dharma, Democracy, Democracy with Dharma. What exactly do you mean by this?
The international edition of the book was titled simply Dharma, Democracy, on the idea that India is a democracy of duties. Now, whether you think Dharma means duty or Dharma has 100 other interpretations in India, the fact is that Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan said Dharma is duty. All the rest is simply elaboration on that one point. But duty to what? In India, there is a very strong sense of duty to the nation that's very widely shared. We see it in high levels of patriotism, high levels of nationalism. When Indians are asked, are you proud to be Indian? The answers are 99%. That's true whatever community you look at, whether that's Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Christian, it doesn't matter. Everybody is proud of India and proud to be Indian. That is something that is not widely shared in the rest of the developing world. Most democracies that have failed because their people cannot agree on attachment to a single idea of national unity. They break up along tribal lines, along geographical lines, along religious lines, and for Indians to see that, all you have to do is look next door, either way, to Pakistan and Bangladesh, where, of course, the people in West Pakistan, in Punjab and Sindh, could never accept a Bengali prime minister of a united Pakistan. And rather than have a Bengali prime minister, they would rather not have a democracy, since, of course, the Bengalis had the voting power in the country. You can also see it in the fact that in Pakistan before 1971, political parties were either Bengali parties or West Pakistan parties. They were not unified national parties. India, of course, was born with the Indian National Congress as a national party, but not only the Congress, also the Jana Sangh, also the communists. That is, in India, there was a sense that the country was a single national community right from 1947. And that's not something that's true of many other developing countries.
But we're always told that we were an artificial construct, a post-colonial construct, that we didn't have a sense of, an elevated sense of what it meant to be a nation. And therefore, this makes it even more of a miracle, doesn't it? And how does that sort of feed in to the exceptional work that you have done to suggest that we're one of the, actually perhaps one of the only post-colonial states that has flowered into this very vibrant democracy without a splutter? Maybe yes, 2 years, but beyond that, no. Yeah.
Every nation is an artificial construct, not only India. So it is true that India is an artificial construct. What's not true is that it was constructed by the British. India is a construct that was the work of mainly Hindu reformers in the 19th and early 20th century who worked very hard to convince people across the entire continental mass of India that they belonged to the same nation. We can easily imagine an alternative reality in which Bengali nationalism resulted in a separate nation, and in which Maharashtrian nationalism resulted in a separate nation. We can certainly imagine a Tamil nationalism resulting in a separate nation. That didn't happen because reformers in the 19th and early 20th century, in the book I focus on Swami Vivekananda. Vivekananda, remember, arrived back from the Chicago Parliament of World Religions in Colombo and said, I'm back on Indian soil. Now, the fact is, because of the peculiarities of British administration, Sri Lanka went its own way. But that sense that this Bengali monk was arriving in Colombo, and yet he was still in India, is a sense of unity that was developed. It wasn't something natural and inevitable. It was developed by people who were nation builders. And if I can be frank, I think that generation of nation builders is far too little read in India today.
That's an interesting one, because if you go further back in time, you had people like Shankaracharya, and even, for instance, if you go further back in time, you had some Hindu texts that, for example, talked in geographic terms about what was the nascent idea of India then, Bharat. So, do you believe that even if the British had not colonized, we would have evolved into a Dharma democracy?
No. Bharat is a civilizational concept. It is not a modern national concept. I know there's a lot of popularity of the idea now of a civilizational state, but the fact is, what was Bharat is not equivalent to what is modern India. And all I have to do to show that is to say, well, why is Nepal not in modern India? Or why is the Northeast in modern India? Arguably, it should be the other way around if India was a civilizational state based on ancient Bharat. Modern India was developed. There's no reason why multiple countries could not have shared the civilization that is Bharat. Instead, a modern nation was constructed with a national identity out of those disparate regions. And that work was the work of people, and largely of Hindu reformers in India, who created a unified set of networks. If I can digress a minute, the standard story of democracy that any of you who study political science will have read is that a rising middle class creates a civil society outside the sphere of the church that then demands a say in self-government. And that standard story is one that's simply the story of England and the United States and France and the Netherlands. That is, it happened that way in those places, but it doesn't have to happen that way. What is necessary for democracy, and virtually all political scientists agree on this, is that there be a strong, horizontally organized civil society that crosses the boundaries that would otherwise separate us. In Western Europe, that had to happen outside the church, because in the church, Catholics were in a vertical organization, Protestants were in a series of vertical silos. You were either a Methodist or a Lutheran or a Baptist. That is, each of those religious societies in the West were vertically organized. In India, Hindu civil society was horizontally organized. There's no reason in India why you can't go to the Hanuman temple today and the Shiva temple tomorrow. Of course, you can't go to the Methodist church today and the Catholic church tomorrow. That's not allowed. And so where I think Western political scientists have not understood the development of Indian democracy is that they've assumed that civil society has to arise outside of religious organizations. Whereas in India, civil society is thoroughly infused with religion, as is everything in India.
Can I just add to this? See, I'd call this book both expedition and exploration into contemporary India. Events of 2024 are also recorded. But two main suches, I guess, has been the nationhood concept as a Hindu nationhood, and secondly, the feature of democracy. So in democracy, you start with Sri Aurobindo, then Dr. Radhakrishnan, Swami Vivekananda, and then Srimad Bhagavad Gita at the end. So was it a pre-republic concept, this concept of democracy in India, according to you? I'm a bit of a trespasser into the legal journal in this field.
The fact is, virtually every post-colonial state wrote a democratic constitution. The Chinese constitution is a beautiful constitution about individual liberties, freedom of the press, freedom to have parties. It's a beautiful democratic constitution with no democratic reality, because there's no sense of shared endeavor in China. Everything was imposed by the Communist Party. Okay. The same thing is true of virtually every post-colonial state. They have democratic constitutions. What they don't have is an organic nation that has evolved over time that can be democratic. In Ethiopia, when the Tigrayans win the election, everybody else rebels. And when the other tribes win the election, the Tigrayans rebel, because they don't feel they're part of the same nation. So the challenge is not creating a democratic constitution with laws and with a Supreme Court and with institutions. That exists everywhere. The problem is ensuring that those institutions operate. And that operation of the institutions requires that all of us accept that when my Tamil neighbor or my Bihari neighbor wins election, that's okay. We're all part of the same family. And that's simply not true for most other developing countries.
So is that because our secular state is really built on the foundations of a Hindu outlook, a Hindu nationhood, or a sense of Hindu nationhood? Sanatana, for example, talks about a concept, there's a slogan, which roughly translates as that the world is one family. So there is a certain inbuilt conditioning where we recognize each other as also being different, but as one.
I'm a sociologist, not a theologian. Westerners often say that Western democracy depends on Christianity. If you look at the texts of Christianity, there's no hint of any reason why a Christian country should be a democracy. None at all. And in fact, for most of their histories, most Christian countries were not democracies. In the same way, you could take Hindu texts and use them to justify a governance of enlightened kingship. Enlightened kingship certainly is something that could occur within the Hindu fold. Everybody loves Shivaji. You know, there's no sense that, well, he was an autocrat who was not a democrat. He was a legitimate, enlightened Hindu ruler. And that's consistent maybe with Hindu Dharma. For me, the importance of Hindu civil society is not that it's Hindu, it's that it is civil. That people, that Hindus from across India were able to come together. So for example, if there's a pilgrimage site in India, people from all over India will come to that pilgrimage site. People who venerate all different household gods will come to that pilgrimage site together. Well, from a sociological perspective, what's important is that those people are making ties. It's not important whether they're worshiping Jesus or worshiping Shiva or worshiping Ram. The important thing is that they're together. Whereas in Christian countries, they're not together. Catholics don't go on pilgrimage with Lutherans.
Yeah. That's fundamentally because I suppose the Abrahamic faiths do look at the world in a Manichaean sort of black and white perspective, us and them. That's why I was saying that perhaps at the end of the day, the Constitution itself, and maybe, sir, you would be better placed to explain this, is suffused with this pluralism because the Hindu tradition is plural. Would you agree?
Yes, because that's the concept of Hinduism of both Vivekananda, Swami Vivekananda and V.D. Savarkar, whoever is in the eastern side of this river are Hindus. And that's what you dealt with in your book also.
Though for me, I have to say that the only really distinctive feature of the Indian Constitution is that it's very long. It is the world's longest constitution. But that itself reflects the compromises that were made. That people from different communities, when B.R. Ambedkar wanted certain privileges for the Dalit community, and somebody else said, no, I want privileges for my community, and someone else said, I want language privileges for my state, a series of compromises were made that reflect the fact that one community was not imposing on all other communities what the solution would be. And so maybe the length of the Indian Constitution is itself indicative of this process of coming together. But I have to stress, other developing countries that have had very troubled histories have very good constitutions.
Yeah, but you might, as you said, might have a beautiful constitution, but you may not swear by the principles of them in practice. So at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what the written word is.
Broadly, the practices have been followed, whichever government
True.
Yeah.
has
But-
been in the reign.
But I don't think they've been followed because people have a sense of Hindu faith that compels them to obey the Constitution.
No,
I
there's an
think-
innate sense of democracy. There's an innate sense of commitment or a duty to being liberal and accepting.
I'm skeptical.
Okay.
In the book, I have a chapter inspired by Swami Vivekananda that the title of the chapter is Not Only Toleration. Vivekananda said that we can't just tolerate people from other religions. We have to be protean, which means we have to become many-sided, and we must learn essentially to walk in their shoes. We must learn to experience their intolerance from their perspective. Now that's a beautiful, inclusive
So
sentiment.
a sense of empathy.
It is not an inclusive sentiment that is widely shared among politicians in India today. That is, there is that philosophy that is there to be operationalized, but I don't think it is often operationalized. Yes, Hindu faith in principle can and should be inclusive. Let's be honest, often it is not so. Nonetheless, Indian democracy is very strong regardless. That is, I don't think it's the content of Hindu faith. If I look, just for example, I'm a comparative social scientist. If I look at Christian faith, Jesus says, if your enemy strikes you, turn the other cheek. Let him strike that also. It's better to be attacked than to attack someone else. And it's very much a philosophy of ahimsa, and how much Gandhi took from Jesus or how much Jesus took from Shiva, we'll never know. But that said, none of that philosophy has resulted in peaceful Christian countries. Right? Christian country, my own country, I'm an American, is certainly not a peaceful country in the world, yet it's a Christian country. So the content of the religion does not necessarily determine how people will behave in the political world.
Also, what is meant by Hindu? I think that's one
Sure.
area you have explored in your book.
Absolutely. The idea that everybody in India, now there's the Savarkarite idea that everyone whose holy land is in India. There's the current RSS view that everyone who locates his homeland in India is Indian. And then there's, of course, the broader civic nationalist view that everybody who's an Indian citizen is Indian. But that sense of inclusivity is not distinctively Hindu. I mean, the Hindu faith has elements that can be used, can be operationalized into that. But many people never actually live their religions. And many Hindus don't live their religion. The importance to me is that Hindus connected across Bengal, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, Punjab, and created a unified society.
But the question would be why? Why would they do that? I mean, you've talked about Christians who sort of split across sects, and you've talked about Muslims who are obviously split across sects, and they don't really mingle, and there's tension. So what makes the Hindu unique?
It's unique because there's no barrier to cross worship. Virtually, well, all Western religions
So
have
that's
strong
doctrinal,
barriers.
isn't it? I mean, that's what I was trying to get at. That is the fundamental edifice
It's
of
hard
the
to
of
find
the faith.
that. It's hard to find that in the books. Yet it's the practice of people, right? It's the, if you will, the civil practice of the Hindu religion that creates those ties across the country. I don't think it's something theological. I can very well imagine a Hindu faith that is not so integrative.
So one of the words in the Veda is Sarva Dharma Sambhava. All religions are possible. All truths are possible. So that's one of the reasons why the faith is considered so open. You can be an atheist, you can also choose to be a believer, and you can still be a Hindu. And you can still tolerate and live in harmony. But it's interesting because as we've gone on, and this is what you've sort of focused on, there have been fault lines. So let's talk a little bit about these fault lines. What are the principal fault lines?
I mean, the one fault line I focus on in the book is the fault line between India's indigenous elite represented by people who were lived their lives, had their careers, and were educated in India, and India's westernized elite, composed of people who, well, for the most part in the independence movement, were British barristers. Now, in that westernized elite, I don't include only the Congress Party. Of course, the Congress leaders, Nehru was a British barrister, Gandhi was a British barrister, but Savarkar was, for all but an exam that he was not allowed to sit, he would have been a British barrister. That is, the entire realm. Jinnah was a British barrister, right? This entire elite of the independence movement were what we call compradors. That is, people who were able to connect between the British Empire and governance in India. But there was a separate elite in India, people who were locally educated, locally trained, who had their careers in India. Swami Vivekananda is emblematic of that. Dr. Hedgewar of the RSS, the founder of the RSS, is emblematic of that. People who who were certainly highly educated and highly articulate, but who made their lives entirely in India. And this fault line between an internationalized and westernized elite and a very homegrown elite is the fault between Rahul Gandhi and Narendra Modi. It is still the main division point in Indian politics today.
So, for the purposes of our friends here, what do you exactly mean is the distinction between Rahul Gandhi and Narendra Modi? Do they look at things very differently because of where they come from? Or are there commonalities, but there are also obviously different perceptions of who they are?
They're embedded in different networks and have different senses of self. I often use it's almost a joke that if I were at a cocktail party in Manhattan, might I run into Rahul Gandhi at the UN cocktail party? Certainly. Am I going to run into Mohan Bhagwat at a cocktail party in Manhattan? Absolutely not. And these two, but they're both elites. Mohan Bhagwat is not a poor villager, poor illiterate villager from remote Bihar. He is a highly educated member of India's elite, but it's a different elite. And it's an elite that represents what is now emerging as a new establishment in India that has challenged the dominance of the old, westernized, networked into Western circles elite, what you might call, and I call it in the book, Englistan versus Hindistan.
So a lot of people say that the old establishment is the more benign one, the new establishment is problematic, that we must fear it. At least that's what the old establishment says. And I know of people who are my friends and contemporaries, and they have a problem with the new establishment. So the new establishment, they say, is more driven by an ultra or hyper-nationalistic outlook. They're also more insular, and they will therefore differentiate, and India won't be this beautiful land of unity and diversity.
Well, it'll be a different beautiful land. And that's very painful for the existing establishment, for which, I want to be
the old
direct.
establishment.
The old establishment. I'm an American sociologist living in Sydney, Australia, who writes books in English. I'm much more akin to India's old establishment. That would be the people I would network with. They like the same art I do. They want to go to the opera like I do. They read the New York Times like I do. These are my people, if you will. But that does necessarily create a division between them and the broader majority in India. The new establishment in India, while still an elite, and I don't want to pretend for a second that people like Narendra Modi and Amit Shah are not members of the elite. They're very much members of the elite. They're the super elite. But they represent a more demotic elite, a more organic elite. After all, Narendra Modi did his university degrees via correspondence school. He didn't go to St. Stephen's College. And these two mindsets are very different mindsets. Now, the new establishment is undermining many of the institutions of the old establishment. There's no doubt about that. The very Western-facing internationalist institutions, and all we have to do is go to the India International Center in Delhi, and we'll see that the heart of the old establishment there, those institutions are being denuded of funding. They're having unsympathetic chairmen and chairwomen put in place. They are being challenged by the new establishment. Is the new establishment in many ways less refined? Clearly so. Is it in many ways
less refined, as in you're saying that they are bumpkins?
Oh, well, I won't use the word, but I will say that graduating from, getting a degree from Oxford or Cambridge makes you more sophisticated, probably, than
No,
getting
but only
a
in a
degree from
Western.
a
I mean, only in a
school.
Western context. I mean, are we saying
Oh.
that people who go to the University of Bhopal will not have the fine civilities to appreciate art and architecture and the finer things,
Look,
and that you only have to go to Harvard and Oxford to be?
Rahul's going to make me out as an elitist who has a PhD from Johns Hopkins, and in many ways that's true. But the fact is that the IITs in India are the home of the most advanced science, and above that, if you look at any international comparison, yes, does sit MIT and Harvard and Oxford and Cambridge, and even to some extent the University of Sydney.
I mean, that could be, look, hang on, there's something wrong here. Fundamentally, you could say that, look, India was delivered a lot of setbacks. There was, Nalanda, which was greater than Oxford and did fantastic work, and you know what happened to that. There were other universities in India, and we were delivered a setback because of our colonial, obvious, colonized status, and it took us a while, and we were stripped of all our assets, and the West made a lot of money on our backs, and have been able to invest in all those institutions and have benefited from that. But now, as you can see, the Chinese, for example, just to turn this around, not a fan of their political system, but certainly their universities are up in the QS ranks, and they're catching up, and Indian universities are also featuring.
Sure.
Are you saying that people who graduate from Chinese or Indian universities are not as sophisticated?
I could be very
Surely
populist. I could be very populist and very popular among my fellow sociologists and say that the tuk-tuk driver who took me here is every bit as intellectually sophisticated as the journalist sitting to my right and the jurist sitting to my left. And neither of them would deny it. If I said the tuk-tuk driver is just as sophisticated as you,
look, they make
who would
intelligent
deny it?
choices when they're casting their vote, and I think that...
I don't deny that they do, but
Well,
I
there you
think
go.
that it is a democracy requires a suspension of disbelief in that regard. In that I think no one here, in her or his heart, actually believes, maybe you wouldn't say it out loud, few people actually believe that the taste of the tuk-tuk driver is as sophisticated as your taste sitting here at the literature
No, actually, hang on. I
festival.
may not appreciate the music that he listens to because I have no sense of it, and that makes me less sophisticated, less of a... Okay, I mean...
That's a very
I mean, there are a lot... No, hang on. There are a lot of people who appreciate the rag
Look,
of Indian classical music, and I don't have much of an idea of it. That
That's-
doesn't make me any more sophisticated than the person who appreciates the raga. I think
That's a very pleasantly postmodern view you have, and I do acknowledge that the tuk-tuk driver likely speaks 3 languages where I speak 1. There are skills that are different, but to say that the aesthetic tastes of the old establishment in India are somehow more refined, that if I go to the Khan market, I'm going to see more refinement than if I go to the mall in Noida. The mall in Noida is bigger, the mall in Noida has more stuff, but the Khan market is more sophisticated. Now, you may not like the word sophisticated, we can find some other word for it, but I think it's true, and I won't tell anyone what you just said looking at the artwork next door.
I thought that the artwork is beautiful, and I said that the artwork hasn't been given its due, and it's unfortunate that it hasn't because of the elite that refuses to recognize naive tribal art, and it's getting a place today. So fundamentally, I actually do believe that you're wrong on this particular point.
This may be, yes.
You are making a distinction between elite and establishment. In whatever little I could understand from your book.
Well,
As you said, a lot of people you call are less refined. They are also elite.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
as you said.
But I think
But
the
establishment, but there's also, I'll digress a bit, there's a bit of an element of error in your assessment of establishment, because you said most of these old establishments are vegetarian.
not the establishment that India is.
That is not so. I think in India around 80% are still non-veg. But this is just
It
to
depends on the
digress.
definition of vegetarian.
No, even whichever, the widest definition.
No, my father is a vegetarian, but he eats fish and he eats egg.
Well, there you go. But look, I think it's, people will know what I mean, even if some people may object to the term sophisticated. I think everyone would know what I mean when I say that
I don't know what you
the
mean.
taste, everyone else will understand what I mean when I say the tastes of the old establishment India do represent a more refined, more sophisticated vision of what India should be, but not necessarily a more popular version of what India should be. And having that, having that museum or that cultural institution defunded, and instead funds going to give women a kerosene stove with a picture of Narendra Modi over it, which is very crass, that shift is one that I understand.
No, but that
That might
shift
be
even
very
the old
painful.
establishment was making, because this business of giving freebies with photographs on it was a southern practice. It began actually in Tamil Nadu.
It may
That
have.
was many, many years back, actually 30 years back.
I'll
And-
depoliticize this with a little story. I used to teach at the University of Pittsburgh in the United States, and when George W. Bush was up for re-election in 2004, I put up, as a lesson to my students, in my office, I put up the campaign materials I received from the Democrats and the Republicans. The Democrats sent me a 12-page manifesto, which I pinned to my bulletin board, and asked me for donations of $10 up to $100. The Republicans sent me a photo of George Bush and asked me for donations of $100 to $500. Now, the one is more sophisticated, urbane, and in many ways intellectual. The others is crass, materialistic, and new. Well, which one won? The crass, materialistic one won. But the contrast was very clear. And I think what we're seeing in India today, many of the accusations against Indian democracy, the first chapter of the book is all about the accusations that Indian democracy has somehow failed in recent years. Those accusations are driven by the death pangs, if you will, of the old establishment, which is very upset to see its cultural and political influence wane in India.
Yeah, but that doesn't make them right. So let's be honest about that. That doesn't make them right, because if they are speaking to the surveyors in VDem and Freedom House or whatever it is, and they seem to get a view across and are able to convince them, because those chaps are too lazy to do and take a larger survey and meet people from different backgrounds to really understand what makes and moves Indian democracy, you're going to come with this sort of jaundiced view of India, and you're going to say, oh, it rates worse than China
Well, it's
on
not
the
a-
Democratic Index.
it's
I mean,
not
that is
a-
unbelievable.
It's not a lazy view. It's an approach that has a very
It's a biased
solid-
view.
Well, everyone has biases. The approach taken in international rankings is an approach that is susceptible to biases, but is nonetheless well designed. So what the Rise of Democracy Institute survey has done has said we're going to go to political scientists within each country we study and ask them to rate that country's institutions.
Yeah, chosen ones.
And they were very committed. Some of you may remember my hardest grilling before today, which was with Rajdeep Sardesai 3 years ago. And he said, why are these Swedish people and these Europeans rating Indian democracy so low? And I said, no, it's not them. It's India's intellectuals who are anti-Indian. And that phrase went viral everywhere.
It's
because
true.
he didn't understand that the VDem was committed to decolonizing the measurement of democracy by going out to countries and asking their own political scientists to rate democracy. The problem is, well, who are India's political scientists? They're not fans of Narendra Modi. They're not fans of the rise of the BJP. They're not fans of the displacement of the old establishment. Many of them are members of that old establishment. And so they've given India very low ratings which are reflected in India's international democracy rankings. And that's all detailed in the first chapter of the book, the technical details of how that works. Is it wrong? Of course I think that view is wrong and biased. But is that view the...
So all that education of all those elites, the old establishment, their sophistication, ended up making them biased, not open-minded.
Perhaps,
They
but-
couldn't evaluate and couldn't assess independently, and therefore rate India poorly
But
because they have a problem with Modi, who they want to cancel,
Now-
which means
now
that they
you're-
are not evolved.
now you're
that means they're not
grandstanding.
democratic.
That's
That means they don't
grandstanding.
understand democracy. They don't understand how to take everybody together.
Rahul thinks he wrote the book. He has a book on sale. I suggest you go read it. No, look, if you were an international organization asking, who in India should I ask to rate India's democracy? Should I ask renegade journalist Rahul Shivshankar, or should I ask the chairman of the political science department at the Jawaharlal Nehru University? Of course, you should go to the credentialed political scientist. And that's what they did. The problem is that those political scientists have their own view. Now, I think their view is wrong. And in the book, I go through quantitative arguments, not my personal impressions, quantitative arguments showing that that view is quantitatively, demonstrably wrong. However, I don't doubt that it's their genuine expert opinion. Every expert has an opinion. I have expert opinions, but it's important that we differentiate between things that are my expert opinion and things I can objectively verify out in the world. And I think we can objectively verify that India has high-quality democratic institutions. Not perfect democratic institutions, high quality compared to other countries, and high quality compared to India in its own past. And this is where the turnover in the establishment really comes to the fore, because much of what the democracy indices do is compare India today to India under Congress rule. And since almost all of those political scientists will be congressmen or Marxists, in their view, India today has become anti-democratic, when in reality what India today has become is anti the old establishment.
The one thing I must say, just a second,
Sure, sir.
is that Salvatore's book, the first couple of chapters go quite deep into dismantling the international rating system on democracy. So if you really want to get in and read and understand why these VDEMs and freedom indexes and all of that are getting India wrong, please do read, because he does actually, hair by hair, split their arguments apart. And it's done beautifully through data. There is no subjective interpretation. I'm just giving him a bit of a hard time.
And I should say, I'm not hot because of the lights, I'm hot because of the grilling from Rahul. He makes me nervous.
Well, gentlemen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we are really enjoying this fun banter. Let us give everybody a glimpse of what the book looks like. It's time we officially launch the book Democracy with Dharma. I would request the director of the festival, Mr. Ragachandraji, accompanied by the co-founder of the Society for Culture and Environment, Brigadier Sanjay Agrawalji, to please come onto the stage. I would request all our guests to please come forward and let us unveil, launch Mr. Salvatore's much-awaited book, Democracy with Dharma, about the Indian perspective. A large round of applause, everybody. It was really a discussion worth remembering, filled with plenty of fun banters. And thank you so much, gentlemen. And now, to make this a two-way communication process, let us invite questions from the audience one by one. We have around 5 to 10 minutes only. Please try to keep your questions crisp and to the point. Anybody who has any questions to Mr. Salvatore, or maybe directed at Rahul ji, or about the book? Yes, यहाँ पे आगे एक हाथ खड़ा हुआ है. Can we pass on the mic to the lady in front? And yes, यहाँ पे. Please stand up, tell us your name and your question.
Hello everyone, I am Dr. Sonal Khare. As a political scientist, I would like to ask you, as whatever we could understand from your discussion, you are saying that India as a society is very unified or tolerative or very collaborative in nature, that so for that matter democracy is our dharma. This is what you are trying to say. So can we place it in the larger context of democratic theories, that India has a way of democratic principles which can be developed in future, or which are still there available in the Indian society, Indian political practices, but has not come up to the word. So many new political theories or democratic theories can come, or Indian context of a democratic theory can come, first thing. Second thing, if you consider the ancient India, where we study about Gram Swaraj or the concept of democratic, not even before the word democracy came, India has some kind of democratic principles. So in that way, can we establish in future that India was also a mother of
Please
democracy,
keep it
not just the
precise.
British?
Thank you so much. Even Mr. Bose can answer.
To be honest, I find, I'm a sociologist, and I come out of the World Society School of Sociology. I don't find political theory very interesting or convincing. The World Society School in Sociology is mainly taught and found that countries around the world have simply adopted forms that have existed in other countries. So democracy, modern democracy, really originates in Massachusetts in the United States in the colonial period in the 1600s. The first Constitution of Massachusetts was democratic, and the fundamental sociological reality of it is that when Europeans found themselves in a hostile land so far away from the King of England and Parliament that they couldn't refer questions back, they asked, how are we going to make decisions? And the answer was, we'll just all take a vote and go with the majority. And that evolved into the Constitution of Massachusetts. The original was the Mayflower Compact, then the Constitution of Massachusetts, which later became the basis for the US Constitution, which then later became the basis for democratic constitutions all around the world. Dr. Ambedkar, of course, has his doctorate in law from Columbia University Law School in the United States, and the Indian Constitution is in many ways inspired by a mix of Commonwealth inherited practices and American law that Ambedkar learned at Columbia. The book is called Dharma, Democracy, not because I think there's a unique Indian theory of democracy, but because Indian society is dharmic. That is, the electorate in India is dharmic, not the laws, but the people who are voting for those laws. Now, as for ancient India, I know it's become very popular in India to trace Indian democracy to 5th century BC. I'll just tell you, it's very popular in Greece to trace Greek democracy to ancient Athens in 5th century BC. But modern Greek democracy has no connection to ancient Athens whatsoever. And I'm sorry to say it, and I know I'll be vilified on this stage for doing so, modern Indian democracy has no connection to ancient Indian democracy. Modern India was a democracy before modern Indians realized that the ancient Indian democracies even existed.
Next question, Brigadier Sanjay Agrawalji.
I am Sanjay Agarwal. Short question. In your view, what are the three major challenges to the vibrancy of Indian democracy? Thank you.
The big fault line is obviously the religious fault line. There's an entire, well, 2 chapters of the book devoted to this, that a democracy founded on the unity of a Hindu nation in India has the obvious challenge pregnant within it that what role is there for Muslim Indians and for Indian Christian Indians, Indians of other faiths, of no faith, in that nation? Of course, every Indian has equal rights under the law. That's not this, or similar rights under the law. There are issues of personal law, but equal rights under the law in India. Every Indian is an equal citizen of India, but every Indian is not necessarily equally included in the Indian nation. And I'll just give you some very worrying statistics. Among Hindu Indians, 81% tell us that to be truly Indian, you must be Hindu. Now that's worrying enough, but a much more concerning statistic is that among Muslim Indians, 44% also believe that to be truly Indian, you must be Hindu. The long-term vibrancy of the Indian nation requires that those statistics be reversed and that everybody accept all of their neighbors as Indians. You asked for 3, I'll just say very quickly, there are the caste fault lines. So caste-based policy has the potential to divide, especially state-level elections, along caste lines instead of along policy lines. So it's unhealthy for democracy when a state is governed by whichever caste wins the election instead of being governed by whichever party and policy position wins the election. And then, of course, there is a linguistic fault line that's been very much in the news the last few weeks. That's not likely to tear India apart, but it is something that India has to solve.
We'll quickly move ahead one by one, the lady in the front, and then I'll come back to that.
Yeah,
side.
my name is Poonam Bagai. I just wanted to know why you changed the name of the book. You call it Dharma, Democracy, but you haven't told us why it is called something different over here.
Thank you.
I didn't change the name of the book, something many people don't realize. Authors don't name their own books. Dharma Democracy was the Western title of the book. The Indian publisher, Vitasta, didn't like the title, was very much against it, and changed it to Democracy with Dharma. They gave me several options. That was the closest. It was very important to me that Dharma remain in the title. But if I had my way, the Indian edition would still be called Dharma Democracy.
Ma'am.
I should stress, it's the same book, just with minor edits. I think you're right that it changes the impression of what the book is. I was strongly opposed to that, but we make compromises to get our books published.
It's a very personal question. What motivated you to write this book on India and about democracy of India?
I was originally writing a book about development in India, and it quickly became apparent that the real issues were not development. Almost everyone agreed with me. I could have said Viksit Bharat 5 years ago. I'd actually been writing that India would converge with China by around 2045. That gives you pretty close to the 2047. 2047 is the deadline. So everyone agreed with me on that. But when trying to publish articles about Indian development, I was continually stymied by editors, Western editors, some of Indian origin, who could not abide my writing things that said that India was on the right track or that India was doing well. There was such strong pressure to write things that were condemning India or criticizing India. And I realized that the big issue was Western impressions of Indian democracy. And so I wrote a working paper about the democracy indices. I wrote a working paper about anti-Hinduism. I wrote a working paper about caste debates in America, and then eventually wrote the book.
Okay, next question, please, quickly.
Sir, I am MB Singhal. The today topic was launch of democracy with Dharma. Don't we think we have bit deviated from the... So don't we think we have bit deviated from the main topic?
What's the main topic?
The launch of democracy with Dharma. And we are talking about the university education and this. We are talking about our democracy with Dharma.
He feels that we deviated from the topic.
Yeah, I don't quite understand the question. All of these issues.
I think that
He
was.
will tell you. Sir, please.
I think that was more than a statement rather than a question.
Okay, leave it.
Once you read the book, I think it will be very clear. Yes, agar mic nahi aa raha, maybe. Do we have the mic there? Can we please pass the mic to the lady standing right there, please? Quickly, last question. And we'll wrap it after this. We are running very short of time. Please, quickly.
Hello.
Yeah.
Do you
audible.
think this is the right time for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission in India? Because the Hindu majority can not always be wrong, and this is the, like you mentioned, the elite. So you're still kind of mentioning the elite, which has been in power for so long, which has influenced the policy making, which has influenced the academia, which has influenced the knowledge economy. So do you think there's...
India needs an honest engagement with history, and that honest engagement is arising through a lot of, especially pop historians, who have taken on the challenge of writing what they see as the true history of India and the true history of events. I have to say in this book, I had to do a lot of primary source historical research because I couldn't trust the narration of the historians of India. And so the book is based largely on primary sources, not on the work of historians. That said, I don't think a Truth and Reconciliation Commission makes much sense. These have been used in other countries for very recent crimes. A Truth and Reconciliation Commission that looks back to the Middle Ages, I think, is probably not going to be very productive. In addition, Truth and Reconciliation to give the truth about a community that is, let's face it, already socially excluded community, I don't think would be something that would foster national unity. There does have to be truth in history telling, and the fundamental problem on which the composite culture thesis of Congress historians fell down was that it was inauthentic. You can't make Aurangzeb out to be a hero. Aurangzeb was a murderous, destructive emperor. There's no two ways around it. But that honest engagement with history is something that should come from historians, from seminars, from the public, from TV documentaries. Honestly, I don't think it would make sense or be productive for harmony in the future in India. It wouldn't be productive for the building of the Indian nation to have such a commission. I really want to stress to you, the key challenge for India in the coming generations is to unify the Indian nation. That is what you have to do if you want to continue to succeed as a democracy. Sometimes that requires a graciousness about things instead of necessarily asserting one's full rights. And that's a challenge. It's something I would encourage everybody, if you want reconciliation in India, read Vivekananda.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Let's give them a big round of applause for such an enriching discussion. I would like to invite on stage the director of the festival, Mr. Raghav Chitraji, as well as Mr. Abhilash Khandekarji, the co-founder of Society for Culture and Environment. We would love to present you a token of love and appreciation on behalf of the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival, which is the memento of the year, created by Gond artist Padma Shri Durgabai Vyamji. This painting that you see, the beautiful Gond painting, is titled as Little Gorliya, a story of devotion, and the artwork depicts a tiny bird which is loved by Bhangsu, which is transformed by the tribal god Burradeva into a beautiful maiden. There it is. Thank you so much to Mr. Salvatore, Rahulji, and Justice Bose. Zora Talia, please everybody, a big round of applause for them. Democracy is all about sharing your thoughts with a free mind. That's what even the BLF is all about. Okay, so now we have two sessions at two different venues. I'll let you know about both of them.